Hello, good evening and welcome. I'm Kate Collings and I'm the Stud Secretary at West Kington Stud, one of the UK's top studs based in North Wiltshire and owned by Jane Holderness Rodham. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you joining us for tonight's webinar, Breeding for Excellence, the Benefits and a Technical Update on Freezing Stallion Semen. This event is a collaboration between West Kington Stud and B&W Equine Vets, and we're delighted to bring together a panel of experienced and knowledgeable speakers to share their expertise with you this evening. Just before we get stuck in, I'd like to give you a quick rundown of what to expect from tonight's webinar. We'll hear from Chris Shepherd and Anna Mitchell, two specialist reproduction vets from B&W, as well as Harry Thirlby, our own stud manager at West Kington Stud. We're also privileged to be joined by international event rider Nick Gauntlett, who will share valuable insights from the perspective of a stallion owner wishing to market his stallion's frozen semen. Throughout the session, we'll be running a few interactive polls to gather your thoughts and help us to understand what interests and concerns you most. I'll be introducing the first poll in just a moment to get us started, and we'd greatly appreciate your participation wherever possible. Following the presentations, we'll have a Q&A session where you can put forward any questions you may have for our panel. Please feel free to use the chat box throughout the session and we'll address as many of your questions as possible during the Q&A at the end. I'd also like to remind you that this webinar is being recorded and a link will be made available on social media. It can also be emailed to you upon request. Now, let's begin with our first poll. Okay, shall we have a look at the results? Thank you for participating. It looks like most of you are using chilled semen for breeding. So over the course of the evening, we'll take a look into the possible reasons behind that and address any questions later on. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to B&W Vet and specialist in equine reproduction, Chris Shepherd, for our first presentation. Over to you, Chris.
Kate, if you can share my presentation, please.
Yes, just one moment. Talk amongst yourselves just for a moment. Banners, sorry.
So obviously the aim of this evening is to promote the use of frozen semen. But there have been some historical and anecdotal concerns about using frozen semen. And the first poll is interesting that it appears that a minority of people are using frozen semen. So I'd just like to highlight and address and hopefully put to bed some of the historical concerns. Next slide. Thank you. So yeah, historically, the sort of comments that have been circulated are that pregnancy rates are not very good with frozen semen. Stallion semen doesn't freeze very well. Using chilled and fresh semen is preferable. Well, we've had huge advances in how we freeze stallion semen, and Anna's going to, in the limitation of a 15-minute presentation, is going to talk us through how we are freezing semen better, and how the results with frozen semen are now so much better. In a minute, I'll share some conception rates with chilled and frozen semen, and show that rates are just as good, if not sometimes better, with frozen than chilled. People worry that using frozen semen is laborious and expensive. Well, again, the way we inseminate it has changed hugely over the years, and we now have protocols that make the insemination process so much easier to do, and I'll talk you through the one that we most commonly use. Yeah, there's been concerns that pregnancy rates have been poor. Owners have paid for multiple vet packages and had no pregnancy, and that has resulted in the mare being at stud for all summer, and big keep fees as well as vet's package fees. But as I say, things have changed and moved on, and we this evening are hopefully going to put a lot of these old anecdotal concerns to bed. Next slide, please, Kate. So let's get back to what we're meant to be talking about, which is promoting frozen semen and the advantages for the stallion owner. The main one being for competition stallions is that they can keep competing for most of the year. And the aim is that an owner can send a stallion into a collection centre, usually during the off-season, out of competition season, and can have sufficient number of doses frozen in a week or 2 week session to provide enough doses for a nomination of mares for the following season or the following 2 seasons, depending how busy the stallion is. So the aim during the collection process is we normally collect stallion 3 times a week. The number of doses you get per collection is hugely variable, but as a very broad part average, we might say you'd hope to get 10 doses from each collection, so 30 doses per week, 60 doses for 2 weeks. As far as insemination is concerned, we as inseminating vets only aim to use 1 dose per cycle. So potentially you've got enough in a 2 week collection period to inseminate 30 or 40 mares, in the recognition that they're not all going to get pregnant on the first dose. But the practicalities would be favourable. And I think Nick is going to talk us through how frozen semen has worked in a practical way for him. And then we can, once we got the frozen semen as a stallion owner, distribution, okay, you can distribute to the EU with chilled semen, but logistically, if you go beyond the EU, and sometimes the EU, but if you're going to go worldwide, then having frozen semen is definitely preferable. Next slide, please. So headline advantages for the mare owner. Main one is that as a mare owner, you can order it in advance of needing it. So there's plenty of time to go through getting it sent to you, putting it into a storage tank on site, and having it available when it's needed, when the mare needs to be inseminated. So we don't have worries about trying to get chilled deliveries over weekends or bank holidays when the couriers are generally not working. Doesn't happen very often, but occasionally, for whatever reason, a stallion collecting for a chilled semen delivery just won't collect. And that's hugely frustrating for the mare owner at the other end, waiting for the semen delivery that just can't be sent. The other thing about working with frozen semen as a mare owner and buying a nomination or buying the semen, generally, and assuming that the frozen semen has come from a reputable and reliable and recognized collection center, then you should be able to have an analysis of that frozen semen, and with or without the help of your vet, you can decide whether you think the statistics of that frozen semen is good enough for the price that you're going to be paying for it. And we, in a minute, we can just talk through what you can expect from a frozen semen dose. And then also, obviously, for mare owners, frozen semen just gives you access to stallions worldwide. So next slide, please. So yeah, just a little bit of information on if you are buying frozen semen, the sort of statistics that you should be provided and information that should be available to you. So obviously the number of straws, it's variable. Sometimes it's 1 straw, sometimes it's 8 straws, but that information is obviously important. The concentration of sperm that the semen has been frozen should also be available to you. It's going to be somewhere between 250 and 300 million per mil. So it is very concentrated. Post-thaw motility, usually somewhere between 30 and 50%. That may not sound great, but as I say, it is very concentrated. So as long as you've got sufficient numbers of sperm, even if the motility is maybe not as high as it would be with fresh semen, then you can get sufficient, what we call progressively motile sperm in the dose to have a good chance of getting a pregnancy. Different collection centres put different number of sperm in their dose. West Kington work on around 300 million. But it is variable, and other centres and sometimes owners are keen to provide much smaller doses. And if you're only using 1 straw per dose, that probably means there is going to be a much smaller number of progressively motile sperm in that dose, and that can work perfectly well if everything goes well and their fertility is good. But at the outset, it's important to know what the dose consists of, and then discuss whether it's appropriate for you as a mare owner. Next slide, please. So just going back to the point that frozen semen doesn't work as well as chilled semen. Results from quite a few insemination centres would suggest otherwise. And these are figures from our insemination centre, the B&W insemination centre at Willersley. They're relatively small numbers, but you can see that the conception rates for frozen semen for the last 3 years have been above those that we've had for chilled semen. these are per season pregnancy rates, not per cycle. But as I say, the theme is consistent through those 3 years. I haven't actually got figures for 2024 yet, but I suspect they're going to be the same. So we're happy that the conception rates with frozen semen are just as good. In our case, it's better than with chilled semen. Interestingly here, the frozen semen figures are also better than the fresh semen figures, which realistically is not going to always be the case. But in our population of mares that we've inseminated, that's the way it's worked out. Next slide, please, Kate. Yeah, this is another survey from another insemination centre. This one was published in the Journal of Equine Veterinary Science a few years ago. There's quite a lot of information here, but the key bits I put in red. So this is actually records for just over 1,000 insemination cycles. That the overall pregnancy rate, and so yeah, let me backtrack. This is pregnancy rate per cycle. So not per season, not at the end of the season. This is per cycle. So pregnancy rate per cycle, average pregnancy rate was 52.2%. Frozen thawed semen achieved a similar pregnancy rate to chilled semen, 48%, compared with, struggling to read my screen here. But frozen semen was slightly ahead of chilled semen. So very consistent, very similar theme to the results that we've had at our insemination centre. And as I say, I think this opinion and these results are being shared generally now. Next slide, please. So just very quickly, just want to describe how we've made using frozen semen easier when we inseminate it. We know that we have to inseminate it within 6 hours of ovulation if we're going to get good conception rates. And historically, that meant scanning mares every 6 hours, so 4 times a day, and until they ovulated, and then inseminating them. That was hard work. It's hard work for all involved, us the vets, those people that are handling the mares, and it's pretty tough on the mares as well, going into the stocks and being rectaled and examined so many times. But we have moved on, and we now have fixed time insemination protocols, which makes the insemination process much easier. Very briefly, the way it works, when the mare's in season, we start by taking an endometrial swab to make sure she's clean inside the uterus. So that's the same whether we're doing fresh, chilled, or frozen. We then, with ultrasound, monitor follicle growth, maybe every day, or in early season, every other day. When the mare has got a follicle 35 to 40 millimeters in diameter and good edema, that is the day that we give a drug to make the mare ovulate, either Coralin or Ovuplant, bearing in mind that drug takes about 40 hours to work. But that's our synchronization starting point. We scan them the following morning, but just as part of our normal stud round, so between 8 and 9 in the morning. We don't expect them to have ovulated, but we're just checking them to make sure that they're on course and everything's looking okay. Same again that afternoon, but not unsociably. We normally do it at about 5 o'clock, late afternoon. We then scan them around 8 o'clock the following morning. So that's 36 hours after we've given them the drug to make them ovulate. In most cases, they haven't actually ovulated by then, but they are approaching that 40-hour window for the drug to work. So during the morning, when we're usually at the studs anyway, we can scan them every 2 or 3 hours, and as soon as they've ovulated, we inseminate them. So it's a really good routine. It works well. We get pretty good conception rates with it, and it's a lot easier. Next slide, please. So last slide, in fact. The other good thing about working with frozen semen, having frozen semen, is the principle of preserving the genetic pool. We know that genetic diversity is desirable, and on the flip side, we know that too much inbreeding can produce undesirable traits and can be detrimental. So we want to preserve as many stallions and as much genetics as we can, and frozen semen really helps us to do that. We know we don't know how long the shelf life is, but we assume that as long as it's kept in liquid nitrogen, it is indefinite. So it's going to be there, once we've frozen it, it's going to be there for a long time. People like the Rare Breed Survival Trust are doing a great job, and they specifically are encouraging freezing from rare breeds, and they've developed their gene bank, and it's worth just checking it out on their website. But as I say, the principle of preserving the rare breeds is excellent. And then finally, frozen semen allows us to do, it's rather grandly called genetic salvage, but it really means being able to harvest sperm either after castration, if an owner, for whatever reason, doesn't want to take their stallion to a collection centre to have semen collected and frozen routinely, we can harvest sperm from the epididymis of the testicle after a stallion's been castrated and freeze it. And then also, sadly, if a stallion has to be put down for whatever reason unexpectedly, it is possible to remove the testicles and preserve those genetics by freezing the semen in the same way. Okay, that's my bit done. We're going to have another poll, please, if we can bring that up. So, which factors do you think is most critical for success with frozen semen? So, if we can see the result on that one. Okay, interesting. Thank you very much. I'm going to now pass over to Anna Mitchell, who is going to give us an update on freezing semen and maximising semen quality.
Our very high-tech chair swap here. Brilliant, yeah. So thank you for coming, everyone. And yes, if you're able to share that on my screen, that'd be great. I'll share my presentation, that'd be great, Kate. But yeah, so talking about maximising semen quality and success with processing for freezing. So and this starts even before the stallion goes to stud. Oh, here it is. Brilliant. The last slide. Brilliant. Thank you.
Sorry, Anna.
Oh, that was right. I think you just need to slide up a bit, and that would have been it.
Can you see that?
Yeah, we could do. Now it's gone again, but. Yeah, we can see it now. So yeah, if you're just able to just slide up the left-hand column and just go to the first slide, that'd be brilliant. No, that's the last one. Yeah.
Sorry, that's what I can see.
Just be able to. If you start it, it will hopefully go. Yeah, yeah. Yes, perfect. Yes. So if you go on to move on from that, that's great. So yeah, so the whole process starts before the stallion goes to stud. So when considering collecting your stallion for freezing, the preparation starts with considering soundness in the months before, and doing what we can to ensure that the stallion is as comfortable as possible, feeding appropriately, and considering the general fitness of the stallion. Obviously, if they're in work, that's easy. If they're retired or not in work, it's worth introducing some degree of fitness. The collection process is quite a physically demanding process, so we don't want going from it, where possible, from doing nothing to then collecting quite intensively. And then, so yes, so if we move on, Kate. So the nutrition. So as I mentioned, so we need to think about this early. So in the at least a couple of months before we start the collection for freezing. So the diet really affects semen quality, but the changes take time. So pretty much 2 months for those changes to appear in the semen. So the complete spermatogenic cycle. So that's the cycle for sperm to develop, takes 57 days. So we need to be thinking about this fairly early, where possible. Obviously, sometimes it's not possible, and sometimes decisions are made closer up, which is fine. But certainly, if it's if we know that this is coming in the next few months for a stallion, then it's worth thinking about. Breeding stallions, as I said, it's a physically demanding process, and they do require more calories per day than a non-breeding stallion. Ideally, we like them to be around body conditions score 5 or 6 out of 9. So at rest, not necessarily seeing the ribs, but being able to palpate them, feel them quite easily. And whereas a non-breeding stallion may do fine off forage alone, that often isn't the case with breeding stallions that need higher calorie feeds to meet demands. But again, forage is extremely important and has an impact on semen quality as well. Okay, on we go. So certain nutrients have gained sort of interest as being important for fertility, and some come from other research in other species as well. But there's a very high lipid content in sperm, and that leaves the sperm very vulnerable to oxidative stress. So antioxidants have been looked at extensively: vitamin A, C, vitamin E, selenium, and lots of other botanical agents, carnitine, and an amino acid. And in the horse, as it often is, the evidence isn't always that clear as to what's the most important what are the most important supplemental nutrients, and how to deliver them best. But there certainly are more there are some that have been sort of better defined as having positive effects on equine semen, and that includes omega-3 and 6 fatty acids, and having a higher omega-3 to 6 ratio, having a positive effect on the cooling and freezing stress that sperm undergo. So in particular, this DHA, which is an omega-3 fatty acid, has been looked at. And this study, that's not new at all, but it's quite a significant study that found that supplementing for 8 weeks improved the progressive motility of the sperm. And so we see this graph on the right shows it with the up on the y-axis, this progressive motility, and then on the axis is 24 hours cooled. The black columns are the non-supplemented stallions, and the motility of the grey columns, so the supplemented stallions, is significantly higher at 24 and 48 results. And the same was found for frozen thawed semen as well. So if you move on, Kate, but it's not necessarily straightforward, as I said, in knowing how to deliver the right amounts of these nutrients into a stallion. And there's been extensive research into linseed, which is high in omega-3 fatty acids, but does that deliver the right amount? Sometimes, and actually excessive fatty acid can actually have negative impacts on semen quality. So that's not straightforward, but we're lucky that we have some good supplements out there. This one from NAF is well formulated and delivers and can be really helpful. And actually, West Kington Stud were involved in the development of this supplement, and it's certainly can be helpful. But certainly, it's a balanced diet. It's not the be all and end all, and general health and a balanced diet is very, very important too. Brilliant. So we'll go on to pre-freezing tests, which we won't dwell on, but certainly we just need to make sure that the stallion is clear from venereal diseases, so a blood sample for EVA and EIA, and then swabs for venereal pathogens from the prepuce and penis area. If the semen is to be eligible for export, then additional tests, or at least consideration of timings of when the tests are done, will be needed. We move on from that. And then just assessing what we're assessing before we start freezing the semen. So when the stallion arrives, we want to have a sort of assess his general health and breeding history, body condition, general physical exam, and reproductive exam. That might just be looking at the external parts of the reproductive system, or if any concerns, we can look internally as well. And an orthopedic assessment, again, maybe very straightforward. Also just an idea of how the testicles palpate, and also how they look on scan can be really helpful. So the sperm production in a normal stallion is a reflection of the volume of the testicles. So measuring calculating the volume based on ultrasound, we can then work out how much semen we expect that stallion should produce, and then we can compare that to what he is actually producing and see, okay, is that what we expect, or is he actually producing less? Is there a problem with the ejaculate? Is he not collecting properly? Or is that what we expect? And also we can identify abnormalities in the testicles. There's actually a bit of fluid, there's some hydrocele in that testicle in the image. So moving on. So, and then continuing with the assessment. So once he's collecting, we want to assess the libido, the comfort, and sort of style of how he's collecting. And often the experienced team at West Kington Stud, that will be done by them, and they report back if there are any issues. But that's an important part of their daily collections. Obviously, if the stallion hasn't been trained to a dummy, that will be needed. And then getting the stallion just accustomed to the collection process and making sure it's as easy and sort of optimal for that particular individual as possible, so that the dummy's at the right height. And Harry will talk more about their collection setup at West Kington Stud, but and the AVs to their liking. And these tiny little details can make a huge difference in the sort of maximising the success, getting the best quality semen, the least gel, the best quality semen, and the best numbers. And then clean out collections are really important. So any stallion that hasn't collected recently, the sperm will accumulate in the ducts, the tubes that come off the testicles basically, and those will accumulate in huge numbers and be poor quality. So some of them dead, a lot of them with detached heads. And it's only gradually that we can by collecting that stallion that we can reduce that rusty load and start getting the best quality semen. And that will be, and gradually as we clear out that accumulation, we'll then start reaching the daily sperm output, which is sort of the number of sperm that the testicular cells can produce daily, and that's what we can then compare to the calculated daily sperm output from our scans. Okay, and then moving on to more of the actual process. So we'll then be assessing the semen itself. So the gel, any gel that's there, so that's often we get large amounts if the stallion takes a long time to collect or has multiple jumps on the dummy before he actually ejaculates. The colour of the semen, so this image, there's some blood, so it may have burst a blood vessel at very high pressures during ejaculation. There are also sometimes there can be some sort of debris or even urine. Sometimes they can ejaculate and urinate at the same time. That really affects the quality. So we pay real attention to those small details. We look at the volume and concentration. At West Kington Stud, we're fortunate to have a nuclear counter, which is a very accurate way of determining concentration, and uses a DNA dye to stain each sperm, which is then picked up and then can give us a very accurate result. And then looking at the motility, so how many are going in a straight line, the progressive motility that Chris talked about, and how many are just poodling around in a circle and are not going to be doing any good. And then we look at the morphology as well, so using a special stain. So this on the left, this image has a lot of detached heads. So this is the kind of picture that you get from a stallion that hasn't been completely flushed out and still has some accumulated sperm, whereas the one on the right has got more morphologically normal sperm, which is the ones that we're hoping to freeze. Great. So then we'll move on to the process, the freezing or the cryopreservation process. So where we collect and then we centrifuge this semen to remove most of the seminal plasma, and we use this cushion to centrifuge. So this is a fluid that we put at the bottom of the centrifugation tube, which protects the sperm from the high centrifuge pressures, protects from damage, and then it's the pellet. So that's the concentrated sperm at the bottom is then diluted in an extender or a cryoprotectant, which we'll talk a little bit about. There are different types, and then frozen in a machine, which I think the next slide will show, but I think Harry will also show some more detail. But it's this is a machine that will ultimately lower the temperature to minus 196 degrees centigrade. So pretty cold, and this allows, having this programmable freezer means that we can, depending on which cryoprotectant or which extender we're using, we can freeze it at the optimum rate, and that does depend on that does vary with which extender you're using. So there are less sophisticated versions where you can just freeze it using liquid nitrogen, and but you don't have the control that this machine will give. And each another little detail of the process just helps maximize the best results. So it's frozen in 2 steps, basically, one slower and then one's faster. And the aim is to allow the cells to dehydrate, and so it needs to be slow enough for that to happen, but fast enough to prevent ice forming, because ice is very damaging. So then if we move on to the post-thaw process, once the semen's been frozen, in this case at West Kington Stud, one of our team then objectively assesses the post-thaw motility of all the semen frozen. So there'll be a test straw that's kept aside that represents that collection only. Each collection is treated very separately, and then we assess the post-thaw motility and the concentration, so that we can work out how many. We can make up doses, basically, work out how many straws are needed to make up a commercial dose. And the freezing process is stressful. Not all will survive. So getting that, so maximizing it is a challenge, and we're always striving to make it do better each collection, basically, for that stallion. And then if we move on, Chris talked about the standards. So this is actually some semen. I think it is a video case. If you're able to, on the bottom left of it, there should be an arrow to start if it wants to whiz around. If not, we'll move on. There we are. So you can see something. Let's move on quickly. We'll carry on going. So factors affecting success. So age certainly is an important one. So stallions that are too young or sexually immature won't have top quality semen. They won't be at their peak fertility or peak semen quality. So in that case, leaving them for some more maturation is sensible. And also stallions with age, testicular degeneration can happen, and that's reflected in the semen quality as well. There is a stallion factor, so certainly some stallions just can just be poor freezers, basically, and in those cases, there are lots of different processing techniques that we can use, but certainly some just are inherently worse at freezing, have worse post-thaw motility. And then the freezing process itself is extremely important, minimizing that cryo damage. So at each step, the team has to be extremely careful in handling that semen, and it's so important. And just putting a bit of extender or cryoprotectant in that's slightly too warm or slightly too cold compared to what what the semen is as it comes out of the stallion, that kind of thing can just absolutely ruin a whole batch, or can certainly make it a lot worse than it could be. So it's a lot of attention to detail, and also optimizing the process for that individual. And then if we move on to that, so unlike sort of bulls stallions are not selected for fertility. They're selected to be athletes, and so their semen doesn't necessarily reflect them being a top quality athlete. And so for bulls, when they're selected to have semen frozen, that is because they'll have really good post-thaw motility and good fertility rates in the heifers they serve or whatever. Whereas stallions, that's not the case. And equally, there's no one best sort of freezing protocol or extender that's the best for every stallion. Different cryoprotectants or extenders or different processing will suit different individuals. And one of the most important parts of the process is a test freeze. So that's where we work out what suits that stallion best. So if we move on to that, Kate. So the cryoprotectants, there are different. When we say there are different cryoprotectants that we can try, so they work in different ways. So some types of cryoprotectants will stay outside the sperm cell and draw water out that way, where there are others that penetrating cryoprotectants will go into the sperm cell and act in a different way. And there's no right or wrong, but it just it really can vary so much between stallions. So at West Kington Stud, so some of these can be commercial preparations of cryoprotectants, which is and some of those are used at West Kington Stud. And then we're lucky to have West Kington specific formulations as well, which basically they're formulated over years of clinical experience and trials, and it's a very unique and a special recipe that we use very regularly, as well as the commercial ones, and they can really suit some stallions better. Okay, and then we'll move on to. So the test freeze, we tend to, I missed out the sheet actually, but we tend to, it's kind of a minimum standard. We would use, this is commercial cryoprotectant on the left, and then a different specific formulated one on the right, which we would then trial each stallion with. And then we would go from there, either trying different ones or different processing methods, which we have on the next slide. So, for example, so the test freeze is an absolute minimum, and then so say we weren't happy with the results of our the cryoprotectants we'd use, we can look into processing known as colloid centrifugation, which is where we use a special, so it's called, the common one is Equipure. So it's basically large molecules which we in the fluid, which we put at the bottom of a tube, then put the semen on top and spin it, centrifuge it very fast, and then that separates the good sperm, which sit at the bottom, from the dead ones and they sit above this colloid Equipure material, and that way we can then select only the good sperm to be frozen, and that can work well if the stallion's producing a lot of sperm, but obviously quite a lot are lost in the process as well. We can also sort of try do different processing with the seminal plasma. So this is the fluid that's produced in the ejaculate by the accessory sex glands of the stallion, and during centrifugation, as part of the freezing process, the majority of that seminal plasma is removed, but certain studies have shown that actually retaining some of that seminal plasma can help survival during the freezing process, and so sometimes adding back some seminal plasma, or even less commonly, but we can even add seminal plasma from good stallions that freeze well. Do that less commonly, but certainly there are many options in the processing. I've only sort of scratched the surface in this time, but this is a sperm filter I've put there as well. We can do that to filter certain sperm, but it's very much a sort of just trying to get to the bottom of how we can make the best out of that stallion. And then moving on, we're nearly. So if we get a poor freezing, a stallion that has a poor freezing result, so say we do the post-thaw analysis and actually it's well below 30% progressively motile, is it worth trying again with that stallion? It may just be one collection, or it may be more commonly, it may be, okay, we've done it over a few and actually no, we're not getting there. Done some different processing, still not very commercial. I think the broad stroke answer is yes, definitely worth trying again. So definitely worth. Time is the first thing. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this, it takes 2 months for a new spermatogenic cycle, so for a whole new batch of sperm to be coming through. And so if there's been stress within the last 2 months, so whether that's like competition stress or it's had a lot of joints injected with steroids, or a blow to the testes, or it's been really hot over the summer, some heat stress, those negative effects will come out in the semen for 2 months, for the 2 months. So definitely that's the first port of call, is just giving time and saying, okay, we'll try again in the spring, or even we'll try again in a couple of months. We can also, in those stallions that are borderline on the sort of younger spectrum, maybe a 3-year-old, and sometimes you can get very good semen quality, excellent freezing results from those stallions, but sometimes they're slow maturing. They might not be at their sort of sexually mature, and actually a bit of time, and you can have very different results following season. So those are really hands-off way to sort of give to give some more chance to get some better results. And we can also investigate further. So a breeding soundness examination, we can look at the morphology in different ways of the sperm and get ideas of where the problems are happening. So for example, these slides here, so they're the detached heads there, so that's more of a storage issue, like the accumulation that I talked about at the beginning. Here we have mid-piece defects, which are often reflective of a different process going on, and here we have some actual immature cells that aren't yet sperm and have been ejaculated, which is very abnormal and can reflect testicular degeneration. So those, we can get a lot of bit more information that way, and we can do a lot more sort of intensive or sort of further more advanced diagnostics as well. Okay, then we'll just move on to the and lastly, as Chris mentioned, epididymal sperm harvest. Yes, it can be a great tool in stallions that are either castrated and want just sort of a one-off chance to get some frozen semen, or at the time of death, and an important means of preserving valuable genetics. But we don't have the possibility to do a test freeze or multiple test freezes, and so we basically have to go with the processing and the cryoprotectant or the extender that we think works for a lot of stallions, works for most stallions even, but that may work out well and we may have really good results, but it won't suit every stallion, and we're not going to know that until we've done what we can with the semen that we have, and there's no more. So I think hopefully sort of all the discussion we've had highlights how this can be useful, but it's certainly not comparable to collecting a stallion repeatedly and really getting the maximal results out of it. And then I think that's it. And I mean, it's I think we've got one. This slide is just some of the recent, and some of them not so recent, but certainly some of the studies that are coming out, and there's ongoing research into many aspects of how to improve semen freezing in horses. Thank you very much. That's the end of mine. And I think we're on to the next poll. Is that right? Okay. So, what do you see the main benefit of using frozen stallion semen? And this is a single choice, isn't it? But then I feel like a lot of these are very I wouldn't know. Yeah, I feel like I'd want to choose many. Brilliant. Well, yeah. Again, these are quite even because I feel like it's hard. That's a hard one to choose. Great, thank you. And now we're moving on, I think, to the. Is this on to Nick, I think?
I think it's me, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Cool. Hello, everybody. Amanda and I come at this from the other side, I suppose. We're stallion owners and breeders ourselves. As far as I can see, there are really four main reasons to freeze semen. Firstly, frozen semen lasts an awful lot longer than the stallion. Secondly, frozen semen can be transported around the world. Thirdly, semen can be collected out of season, so it doesn't interrupt their schedule. And fourthly, I believe that quite a few people will collect their stallions before gelding them, so they can have a career as a gelding and still a stud career as well. So just to go into those in a little bit more depth. Frozen semen lasts a lot longer than the stallion. For us, this is particularly poignant. We tragically lost our beautiful party trick in a horrible accident, and I will be eternally grateful to Jane Holderness-Rodham, who owns West Kington Stud, Harry Thirlby, and Harry's predecessor, Tessa Clark, for suggesting pushing us into freezing this stallion and actually doing so at a really young age when we thought we had his whole life ahead of him. We luckily froze quite a lot of semen. He spent two autumns or winters at West Kington and luckily froze a lot of semen, which has turned out to be incredibly good quality. And we're still breeding quite a few horses ourselves from him now, as are a lot of people. Obviously, you know, nobody wishes that to happen to anybody, but stallions get old and there are, you know, die of old age, and an awful lot of reasons why stallions have to stop collecting, and you know, there's an awful lot of success from long dead stallions having had some great offspring. Semen can be transported around the world. This is brilliant for us. I'm just going to share my screen now and show you a picture of. Has that come out as it should do? I'm going to show you a picture. This is a foal by Party Trick in Kenya. This is particularly exciting to us through Tessa Clark, actually, Venetia at Soraya Stud asked if she could buy some semen. And I believe she's now had 3 foals by Party Trick, and it's incredible to see them. We see lots of pictures on their fantastic stud, and oh gosh, anybody that has the chance to go out to Kenya and visit them on their safari, I would highly recommend it. That's really exciting. But we ourselves have also got foals on the ground in America. We've got foals on the ground in Norway. We've got foals and in fact semen stored in both New Zealand and Australia. So you know, all that's been done as West Kington have organised and sent that out for us, but it's been incredibly successful and has made what we think is a great stallion in Great Britain available to the world. That has been brilliant. Semen can be collected out of season. Chris talked about this a little bit as well. You know, Party Trick, who's actually in the background behind me here, I think this picture was taken at Burnham Market when he jumped his first 4-star in May sort of time. He was fantastic. He sort of came and went from stud a little bit, but to get to 4-star and to be competing at that level, you know, it's difficult to mix business and pleasure, I think, isn't it? You know, he's got to, he had to spend a shorter season at stud than most people would have liked him to, because he was incredibly popular. So the freezing his semen worked really, really well. Lastly, something we haven't done, but a few of my friends have done, and I'm fairly sure that they've got semen stored with them at West Kington Stud. They've had what they think is a really nice young horses. They don't have the setup themselves to keep them as stallions, so they've sent them to West Kington and they've collected their stallions and then promptly a little operation and gelded them. So yeah, my talk's a little bit shorter than everybody else's, but hopefully you can see that I'm a great advocate of freezing semen. I feel very lucky that we did it, and yeah, I think that swiftly allows me to move right on to a quick poll before we see what Harry's got to say. So, would you consider using frozen stallion semen in your breeding program in the next year? Have I convinced you or not? I'm looking forward to seeing these answers. Hey, I think that's pretty good. Cool. In which case, shall I pass over to Harry?
Okay. Hello. Hi, I'm Harry Thirlby. I'm stud manager at West Kington Stud, and I'm just going to talk you through the inner workings of our stallion centre and our collection and freezing processes. It won't be overly technical. We'll try to do a sort of pretty quick tour through how each bit of it works and how everything goes here. So, bit of an introduction. West Kington Stud was founded in the early 1990s by Tim and Jane Holden as Rodham. They were quickly joined by Tessa Clark, who many of you will know, who was the manager here until the end of 2019. The Stallion Centre was set up in January 1996 under the guidance and supervision of Martin Boyle, who was an equine vet and reproduction expert, and really helped us with his knowledge of everything to do with freezing semen. So we were established in 1996, offering semen collection and freezing for domestic use and worldwide export. And although we've obviously grown and evolved a huge amount over the last 28 years, we still continue to offer the same services, and Martin Boyle's research and techniques still feature very heavily in everything we do, including the fact, as Anna mentioned earlier, that we still use his DV2 freezing medium for over 90% of all the freezing that we do here. So the Stud and Stallion Centre are now run by myself, working in close cooperation with the B&W Equine Vets Repro team, obviously two of whom you've heard from this evening. We also have a large number of mares every year for foaling, insemination, embryo transfer, but obviously the focus of this is on the freezing side of the operation. So our stallion yard, our approach at West Kington has always been that we try to treat our resident stallions as horses. The aim is that we have a functional yard, but the stallions can relax, whilst we maintain the necessary strict biosecurity measures, but without ever making it feel clinical. Our stallion yard can house up to 10 stallions at a time. We've always felt that stallions, being naturally territorial, are happier if they're stabled in a row rather than facing towards each other. Hence, we have the 10 stables in a single line. I'm sure plenty of people will tell me their stallions live happily in a different setup, but we're obviously dealing with different horses and different things. So we're trying to keep everything as happy as possible. So we're big believers in stallions receiving daily turnout as much as possible. We've got different setups and differently situated paddocks just to keep them happy. And it's always so interesting to see how Some stallions love to be down the end of the track where they can watch the farm and watch the world go by and take everything in. Others are much happier living in blissful ignorance behind a high hedge. So, and there we have dear old Kevin Z, who stood with us for many years, covering himself in grass stains. And if we can't turn them out, obviously we will lunge them, hand walk them, hand graze them as appropriate. So we'll now sort of go into an overview of just how we go about collecting and freezing from stallions. So we move on to, everything starts with our teasing boards. They're built to be secure and solid. We use a teaser mare for the vast majority of all of our collections. Some very excitable or very experienced stallions are happy to go without, but the majority of them do need some sort of interaction with a mare. So the stallion comes down, stands on this rubber matted side. The mare would be the other side. Some stallions need a mare very, very close and like to have a long conversation. Others, the sight of a mare is more than enough. You'll see we have two very different heights of teasing boards. This is because we're collecting from anything from 11-hand ponies right up to the biggest warm bloods and heavy horses. So the stallions will come down, stand at the teasing boards. We do expect them to stand. We do expect them to behave. Whilst they're at the teasing boards, we can do any necessary penis washing, which might be needed, swabbing, etc. This is a great place to do it. They're not right in front of the dummy, so they shouldn't be overexcited. And then once the stallion is sufficiently teased, then he will go into the collection area. We'll do a quick diversion to talk about the importance of teaser mares. We just had to show this little mare here. So Dear Caroline was a pony mare we had here as a teaser mare. Sadly lost her a couple of years ago, but she managed a very impressive 25 years of being a professional teaser mare. So she's responsible for many thousands of foals all over the world. She'll be known very well to many of our visitors. She didn't always wear the flower in her hair, but I'm sure it helped. So our teaser mare herd consists of several different mares, all of very different shapes, sizes, types, colors. Variety is the most important thing to keeping stallions motivated and keeping them interested, we find. We have some mares that have been over-ectomized, so had their ovaries removed. That means we can use them at any time. The other mares we can obviously only use when they are in season. We definitely find that stallions, particularly the more savvy pony stallions who've done a lot of natural covering, will know if a mare is legitimately in season. Therefore, having mares that are genuinely cycling and look and smell right makes the world of difference to them. So yeah, once the stallion is, as we say, once he's teased and ready, he goes in towards the dummy. So our dummy area, don't actually have a good photo, but our dummy area has non-slip rubber flooring. The dummy is positioned centrally in the room. We don't want it too close to any walls. We don't want it stuck in a corner. The height is hugely adjustable. As I said, we're dealing with such a huge variety of sizes of stallion, so that's very important. The whole dummy is covered with a washable PVC cover. Obviously, scrubbing and disinfecting between each collection is hugely important. And because we generally take the teaser mare in for the collection, we do have a very large area so we can have the mare well out of the way unless she needs to be close. Just very quickly back on the subject of behavior, we do expect the stallion to walk in towards the dummy. We want them to walk as calmly as possible. They will generally walk in and mount the dummy straight away, which is fine, but it's incredibly important that they travel at a sensible pace. They mount the dummy straight, do everything sensibly, because it's important for the safety of the handler, it's important for the safety of the person with the AV, and it's very important for the safety of the stallion himself that he does behave and do things respectfully. So Once we've collected the semen, it gets taken back into the AV room. That's not really the most informative photo, but the AV room quite simply contains all the AVs and any items that might touch the stallion. It's very important that nothing that could have touched the stallion ever enters the lab. So it just remains within that room. We use a variety of different AVs or artificial vaginas. So a Missouri AV would be probably the most bog standard AV you'd see anywhere in the world. We would use them for the vast majority of collections that we do here. And I'm sure most other people would agree with that, who are collecting from stallions. As you can see there, they come in 3 different sizes for fairly obvious reasons. You may also see a Colorado AV, so it's a different design constructed out of sort of plastic tubing with a latex liner. Some stallions prefer these. They all have their own preferences, and it's not always obvious to us why. So some stallions will prefer these AVs. They can be incredibly heavy and much more difficult to handle because they take an awful lot of water to fill. We also still do have a couple of stallions that really prefer our dear old Cambridge AV, which is one of Martin Boyle's creations. The thinking being very similar to a Colorado. It's a plastic tube with liners in the middle. All AVs are filled with warm water at a temperature to suit the stallion's preferences. As I think Anna touched upon earlier, the stallions will all have clear preferences in everything you do. So, okay, then on the end of every AV, regardless of design, we have a collection bottle. So the bottles are made so they can be cleaned and sterilized between each use. We use these plastic bags, in fact, as you can see, designed to be breast milk bags. We use them within the bottle because, again, it just helps make it an easier and more hygienic process passing it through into the lab. In between the bottle and the bag, there is the little white thing at the top is a filter. We now favor using these nylon gel filters for all of our collections. They just really seem to do a much more efficient job of filtering out gel, dirt, anything you don't want going through. So although they are much more expensive than the traditional paper filters, we think they do a great job. So once we've got the semen, it goes through into the lab. As I said before, only semen is passed through from the AV room, no equipment whatsoever. The lab is fully equipped with all the necessary equipment for processing fresh, chilled, and frozen semen. So we'll get into that now. So microscope obviously is a hugely integral part at every stage of our process. We carry out visual assessment of all semen that enters the lab, so we can assess progressive motility and ensure that it is good enough to process. As Anna's touched upon, stallions have bad days. Stallions have a huge variance in fertility. It's very important before we go into the lengthy process of freezing semen that we know the semen we're dealing with is worth processing. And then obviously the microscope is used throughout the process. We check as we go along and for all of the post-thaw assessment done by the vets later on. Nuclear counter, I think Anna talked about in quite good detail. It does automated counting of our sperm cells. It's the first thing we do with every semen sample that enters our lab is take a concentration. It gives us a number in millions per milliliter, which we then multiply by the volume, and we know how many sperm we've got to work with. It can be used with raw and extended semen, which is incredibly useful. And yeah, we use that initially, and once we've calculated the amount of extender required or the amount of freezing medium we ultimately need, we can use that to continue on with our freezing process. First thing we do, again, Anna, I think, touched on very well the technical aspects of centrifuging semen with a cushion. So for the freezing process, everything is centrifuged. For fresh and chilled, depends on the stallion, but we do quite frequently. So yeah, we do all our centrifuging with a cushion fluid, which you can see in the bottom of the tube here. Most of the commercially available cushion fluids are clear. This Nidacon product, very imaginatively named Red Cushion, is obviously not, but it does make it very easy to remove at the end of the process. So again, I think Anna touched upon this more technically than I am, but yes, everything gets centrifuged. At the end of the centrifuging process, we are left with a sperm pellet of all the sperm cells sat on top of that red cushion there. We remove all the excess liquid that we don't want, and we remove the remove the cushion in the bottom of the tube, and we're left with a sperm pellet, which we can then, sorry, wrong button again. We're left with a sperm pellet that we can then re-extend up to ultimately, we're aiming to be as close to 300 million sperm per milliliter as possible, which is where the nuclear counter comes back in to give us a concentration. And then it's ready to put into straws. So we then move on to our straw printer. Whilst the semen is in the centrifuge, we will be printing the straws with the straw printer for the stallions. Not a very informative video, but here you can see this is how it fires the straws out. So every straw is printed with the date of collection, the stallion's registered name. So this one, if you can see this blurry picture, this one would be for the after party, Nick Gauntlett stallion. So that would be the after party. They have their UALN number from their passport, and place of collection is West Kington stud, and our approval number, which is the UK 9025 EC. This is necessary to meet the export requirements of really any country in the world. So then we move on to the straw filler. So the straws are loaded up into this device here. The extended semen sits in this cone at the back, and then we'll turn off the volume, no need for that. And then this machine, although it's quite simplistic, it saves a huge amount of hassle and faff of the very fiddly job of manually filling straws. So it puts 0.5 mils of semen into each straw at one end, and then this other end of the machine seals each straw so that they're then ready to be frozen. So we then move on to the freezing machine. The straws are loaded into these wire racks at the top here. Anna, I think, went very well into the freezing curves and the different ones that we use. So our computer system is pre-programmed with the freezing curves for any of the freezing mediums that we might use here. As I say, we are largely using the DV2, but we do use some other products. And yes, the computer works following the freezing curve and simply lowers the temperature from room temperature down to incredibly cold so that the straws are ready to be plunged into liquid nitrogen. Once they are then frozen and assessed, they are assessed by one of the B&W vet team, as we were saying, and once we've ensured that they are commercially viable, they're then moved into our freezing semen storage. So we have approximately 90 storage tanks here at West Kington. They're split, sort of 2/3 of them would be filled with semen for export, which could be anything from just for European use to available for worldwide. We also have one room of semen that is just frozen to UK standards, so still health tested, but not to quite the same stringent requirements, so safe for use within the UK, but it doesn't go abroad. So once the straws are frozen, we hope that they can be stored indefinitely. We certainly are still sending out semen from our first ever collection sessions on an annual basis and getting very good pregnancy results. So that's how that works. And then very briefly, semen shipping. Obviously, the end result of all of this is that we hope that the semen will be used by people wherever they are in the UK or elsewhere in the world. So we send out hundreds of shipments every year. largely to the UK, but we also do export semen worldwide. Everything is sent in a liquid nitrogen dry shipper, which generally will in some way resemble what you see in this stock image here. The very best of them, the more expensive ones, naturally, will have holding times of anything up to 28 days. So that is obviously a huge advantage to be able to use those ones. If we are sending semen across the world, it can cope with flight delays, customs holdups, and all the rest of it. So hopefully all goes well and it ends up in its intended destination, wherever that may be. And really, that's all I've got. I hope that's been a sort of good whistle-stop tour of what we do at West Kington and how we do it. And yeah, any questions, obviously, please ask them at the end. And I think we now have another poll. So. Okay, so what topic would you like to learn more about in future seminars? Hopefully we'll see the results. Okay, so it looks like you're all quite split there. So we'll maybe we'll have to do a few next year. Okay, great. Hopefully we can hand back to Kate. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much, everybody, all our speakers, to Chris and to Anna, to Nick and to Harry. All your presentations I thought were eye-opening and interesting. And you all shared valuable insights really on the benefits and the technical aspects of freezing stallion semen. I think we've all learned a lot, and your expertise has been invaluable really in highlighting the advances in this field. So thanks again to everybody. And we're now going to hold our Q&A session. So if anybody has any questions to ask, then please add them now to the Q&A below, and I'll put them to our panel of experts. Anybody? Anybody? Does anybody have an answer to a question that hasn't yet been asked then, any of our panelists? Okay, so Tessa Clark is asking about the selection of mares for breeding for frozen semen. So would somebody answer that? So how do you select a good mare to be a good candidate for frozen semen? Chris, Anna, maybe?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. Yeah, we are a little bit selective when we're working with frozen semen or advising clients which mares to use with frozen semen. And basically we try and avoid so-called problem mares, i.e. mares that have had issues with getting in foal in previous years. Although, as I was saying, the conception rates with frozen semen are equally as good as chilled, if not better, and we have the statistics to confirm that. With the so-called problem mares, we have to admit that there are advantages to using fresh semen, so semen collected and inseminated into the mare almost immediately, certainly within an hour or two. And there's various reasons why that fresh semen is more useful in problem mares. But as as far as our selection for frozen semen, as I say, mares of an appropriate age and with an appropriate breeding history is really what we're looking for.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Chris. Hopefully that's answered that question. And Tracy Arnold is asking how many straws would be created from one collection? Harry, do you want to answer that
one? Yes, I mean, it really is a how long is a piece of string question. Varies wildly depending on, young stallions would typically give us less. If we were really generalizing, the majority of ponies would give you a much smaller number of straws. I would say as an average, we're probably looking at, typically ending up with 50 to 100 straws from a collection. We have had some sensationally good collections where you'll end up with 250, but they're very, very rare. And we have had the other end of the scale, sort of little Exmoor ponies might only give you 5 or 6 straws. So there is a huge level of variance, but I would think maybe 50 to 80 being slightly more conservative would be sort of fairly typical. Yeah, unless anyone disagrees.
No, I agree. And then I was just going to point out also, I was just going to just mention also that the for anyone who it's not clear for, that the breeding dose will involve multiple straws. So we'll then work out how many straws do we need to give 300 million progressively motile sperm. So on average, that will be sort of 5 to 8 straws kind of thing, depending on the quality of the semen. But just thought I'd add that.
Thank you, both of you. And another question from Claire Ballady. How old is too old for a stallion? Can someone answer that one?
Oh, okay, I can go. I mean, I wouldn't put an actual age on it. We'll see what Chris thinks as well. But basically, at some stage, fertility will start declining with age, and often, so at some stage, some stallions may have some testicular degeneration, but that may be not enough to necessarily mean that he's sort of subfertile, as in we'd have multiple stallions that have collected at West Kington Stud that have been well into their 20s. Harry, I'm sure can give more details on that. But I'd say so. I'd say it's very much based on the individual, and I'd say a lot of it. The other very important aspect, other than semen quality or and fertility, is the orthopedic comfort of these older stallions, because that's often a limiting factor as to how happily they'll collect, and can also, chronic pain can affect the semen quality, but also just actually them comfortably getting on the dummy and ejaculating. I don't know if Chris, do you have any more comments on that?
No, I don't think so. Be interested in hearing what Harry has to say on that one.
I would say probably the oldest stallion I can think we've frozen from, collected well and frozen well in recent history was 25. Yeah, he obviously was just a very fit, well and healthy stallion. I think, as Anna says, what we found more and more and more is, even in stallions that come back to us, it does tend to be more the body that can struggle keeping up with the collecting than necessarily always the semen quality. However, we certainly have seen examples of stallions who were, incredibly fertile in their youth, come back at 19, 20 years old and are really struggling. So I think, like with everything, it's down to the individual. But certainly we do quite frequently do sort of 21, 22-year-olds and largely still get good results. So.
Thanks very much. We have a lot of questions here to get through, so we'll answer as many as we can, and any we don't get around to, if you would like to email us, if we haven't answered your question at the end, then we will reply to you that way. But we'll get through as many as we can. So just quickly, Finn Guinness asks, why is stallion semen stored in multiple separate stores, whereas this is not the case for bulls?
Oh, I think that's tricky. Well, I mean, I think the answer probably is, and if you know, Chris, have your take too, but I don't think it has to be. It could be frozen in pellets, or I know that's used quite a lot for dogs as well. Pellets, but it's certainly so I don't think there's a specific reason, but I guess it's for convention and also ease. It's very convenient, and a lot of, especially if you have the equipment, it's extremely convenient. Do you have any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think post-thaw motility of bull semen is probably higher than most stallion semen, and therefore you can get the required number of progressively motile sperm into one straw quite easily with bull semen, whereas with stallion semen, in most cases, we're having to freeze what we call a dose in multiple straws.
Oh, I see. I was thinking of other forms of, yeah. I think you answered the question there.
That's great, thank you. Joe Bleeden, are there special processes required to prepare frozen semen for insemination, e.g. ensuring the semen is woken up correctly? So when you're thawing it out.
It's reasonably straightforward. We thaw it at 37 degrees C. It's important that it's exactly that temperature, or certainly no higher than that temperature. So we usually use water baths set at exactly that temperature to thaw the semen in, but you don't have to have a water bath. You can just make it up with hot and cold water in a polystyrene container and measure the temperature until you've got it at 37 degrees. We thaw them for a minimum of 30 seconds, but as long as the temperature is no higher than 37, i.e. body temperature, they can actually stay in the water bath for a minute or two while each straw is being inseminated.
Perfect, thank you. I hope that answers that question. One for you, Harry. How many stallions are available frozen at West Kington?
I believe we are just shy of 800 different stallions stored here. So yeah, it represents the most enormous range of breeds and types from the smallest to the biggest in every color, shape, size, and variety. So yeah.
Wow, that's a huge number, isn't it?
That's a lot. And how many people are needed for a collection?
So we would want not less than 4 people. To be fair, for the actual collection, that would require 3 people. That works on the theory that there's a 4th person sat waiting in the lab for the semen to arrive. We would have 1 person handling a stallion, 1 person handling the teaser mare, 1 person holding the AV, and then should we ever need it, more people can be involved. But yeah, including having someone sat waiting in the lab, we would use 4 people for a collection, unless we have a particularly tricky stallion that wants 3 teaser mares parading around in front of him, and then we'd need some more people to help.
Thank you. Bruce Langley asks, should it be standard practice to have all mares endo-swabbed before frozen insemination? I've had a referral and the mare was swabbed her with 2 bacterial growths and she had 3 attempts with frozen.
I mean, I think that so we So BNW, basically we include a swab as part of an endometrial swab as part of our package, because we feel that it's something that we routinely do pretty much without, well, occasionally a very young maiden or something might not, but generally we would always do. And I think it's just extremely useful to maximize success rates in my opinion. And it may be that if there's no growth, that's all great, we don't act on it, but in detecting endometriosis, it doesn't necessarily, sometimes, bacteria can lurk out in biofilms and not be detected on a single swab anyway, so it doesn't necessarily mean that unfortunately that's going to detect every problem, but certainly I think it's just really useful. And obviously less so in terms of, with the thoroughbreds, we swab them for venereal pathogens as well, which I don't think is necessary for mares that are going to be inseminated, but certainly just from a diagnostic point of view, I think it's pretty useful.
Thank you. We've got 2 or 3 questions here about exporting to the EU and Europe. Somebody saying it seems almost impossible.
Certainly, post-Brexit, it is not as straightforward as it used to be. We have sort of varied results, I think, almost depending on the knowledge and experience of the people sat in customs at the port in which the semen arrives. We have found, largely speaking, sending things to France that go through Paris airport gets there just as quickly and easily as it did pre-Brexit. If we're sending semen to places where there would typically be less semen arriving, it can be very, very difficult, because I think you can be met by people who have no real understanding of what it is they're looking at or how to handle it. So anything going somewhere sort of more obscure, we do generally now recommend that it is either driven or can be flown sort of on a specific flight. So rather than sending it with a courier, we'd use a freight forwarding agent who would deliver it specifically to the port health wherever it's arriving. That is sadly more expensive, but we've had very, very good success getting things through on that basis. I think it's very important that there's someone on the other end you can talk to, ultimately.
Yes, thank you. And others that are saying that similar topic, how long would a stallion have to stay to freeze in Europe?
Depends which testing program gets followed. There isn't necessarily a minimum time limit actually to freeze for Europe, because we can make the semen eligible by doing pre-entry and post-collection health tests. So there is actually no minimum time period. So it's just a case of allowing enough time to get the stallion here, get him flushed out, get him collecting, and freeze a sufficient number of doses. So for Europe, there is actually no minimum time period. Just typically, you would expect it to take a minimum of a week, 10 days to get everything in action and get the semen frozen.
And then you would just have to do the collection, the post-collection health test potentially at home.
Yes.
Once you've gone home, is that correct?
Great, and I think we've just got time for one more. Jane Mitchell says, why is the Missouri more widely used than the Colorado system?
Probably easier to purchase, I would imagine, is the biggest. They are more user-friendly, and yeah, perhaps Anna and Chris have more thoughts on this, but they are certainly more lightweight, easier to handle. Like I said, those large Colorados, if you really fill them with water, can take 8-9 liters of water, and holding that up with a powerful stallion behind it is quite the workout for the person collecting. So I think on that basis, the Missouris are much easier. Yeah, I don't truly know the background well enough, but they're certainly much easier to purchase. So.
Yeah, I would agree on that. I mean, it's always our starting point with any new stallion, in the hope that they will be happy with the Missouri, just because it's easy and quick to assemble, easy to fill, and it is so much lighter that they are generally, for those reasons, our first choice.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. So I think we're probably ready to wind up the Q&A. If everybody's happy that they've answered all the questions as they should. Yeah, I think that's sort of it from us this evening. All that's left to say is thank you all for attending. West Kington Stud is now accepting stallions for dummy training, collection and freezing. So if you have any further questions or would like any more information, please don't hesitate to reach out to Harry or myself. You can contact us on 01249 782 050 or via email office@westkingtonstud.co.uk or manager@westkingtonstud.co.uk. All the information is on our website, www.westkingtonstud.co.uk, including prices of stallion services. You can download a stallion pack there with all our costs and information on health test requirements, etc. And thank you all for attending and for your patience with our technical and teething problems, which we hope to iron out before any further webinars. So from all of us, we wish you a very enjoyable evening, what's left of it, and look forward to hearing from you very soon. Goodbye.